Hello. Thank you so much for joining me for another beautiful chapter of The Stars Above. It's a wonderful day, much better than yesterday's catastrophe of a day. The sun has still remained. It seems as if the clouds are parting solely in this direction. That must be because of how magical of a day it is, you know. And what better day than for a magical chapter, you know? As promised from my previous chapter, which was quite something, you know, a little bit raunchy, a little bit grotesque, a little bit nitty gritty, a little bit painful, you know, a little bit of a punch in the face, if you will. Not like this chapter. This chapter is extraordinarily beautiful and magical. And I'm assuming, I can only assume, I don't want to make too many presumptions, but I'm assuming that if you are still with me here, watching along, that you are someone who does in fact believe in magic, which is a wonderful thing. I think if more people believed in magic, we would live in a much more beautiful world. You know, right now we live in a world full of chaos and such, which isn't so good. You know, maybe we need more people to believe in magic, and maybe people that don't believe in magic will listen to this story and maybe start believing in magic. You know, more magic, more beauty, I always say. Anyways, today's chapter is kind of a curveball. It delves deeper into the mind of Icarus's mother. You know, and Icarus's mother is, you know, schizophrenic, and she's not always so well in the head, especially, you know, towards her end. But one could argue that was also where her mind was most beautiful, you know, in those tragic days. And so I'm very excited to dive deeper into Icarus's mother's mind. Icarus's mother's mind. Icarus's mother's mind. Say that, you know, three to four times fast. What a tongue twister. The calico cat crawls curiously through the cowardice corner. The calico cat crawls curiously through the cowardice corner. That's how I warm up my vocal cords each morning. It's a lot, you know, on my vocal cords to be recording so much. So I have to do little warm-ups. You know, that's one of them. I have several. We don't need to get into that. Let's just dive into this beautiful, magical chapter. Chapter 19, Seer-O-Phrenic. My mother was a brilliant woman, haunted by thoughts interpreted as disease. Mental illness is a dreadful battle in which eats away at one's sense of self without proper guidance, patience, and understanding. For her, there'd only been two ways of dealing with it: drugs and art. When the voices grew loud, she'd suppress them with narcotics, and when the hallucinations became vivid, she brought them into breathtaking creation. With a gifted hand, she channeled her visions onto paper, wood, and stone. Any medium became her canvas, while anything capable of drawing, carving, burning, or crafting between each finger, a divine tool. It's truly remarkable what the mind of psychosis depicts. It can be utterly horrifying, yet equally etheric. But don't be mistaken, I'm in no way romanticizing it. My mother created rather interesting things, but towards her end, there were only two projects she'd work on incessantly: birdhouses and, what I thought at the time had been, her creatures, much like Celine's. The houses were peculiar in nature, of the fey and wonky-esque, as if from the pages of a Lewis Carroll novel, down the rabbit hole. But to her, they were never quite suitable for living. She built them beautifully, only to tear them apart and begin anew, with finer decor. Her creatures were a different story, being perfect in every twisted way. While each drawing was otherworldly in nature, no two being entirely alike, they always depicted a girl. If she had a body, it was slender and dysmorphic. Sometimes she'd have 2 eyes, others 3, and in odd shapes. The pupils never matched, whether reptilian, feline, made geometric, or as crescent moons. Her hair either flowed as feathers, laid like scales, hung in striped tentacles, was sharp with talons, or abundant in flowers. She may have had wings of an angel, that of a fairy, or those of a bird. The only 2 constants were her petite nose and mouth. The drawings may have been considered eerie and unsound, but I never imagined them as anything other than beautiful manifestations of her mind. And after meeting Celine, having observed her own creatures in immaculate detail, I felt a part of me began connecting much deeper to those of my mother's. Towards her end, my mother's episodes became so severe that there were moments she had a hard time recognizing me, as if forgetting who I was. I'd walk into the room calling her name, standing close as she'd continue drawing, without even realizing I was there. "What are you working on, Mom?" I'd ask without response. "Mom, this is amazing. When did you start this one?" Her eyes kept fixated as her hand flowed passionately. While unresponsive, she'd make adorable little sound effects with each stroke. Chew, pew, shoo. I'd place a hand on her shoulder to divert attention, whispering, "Mom, it's me, Icarus." She'd turn to meet my eyes, yet seemed to look through them. It'd take a few moments before her gaze sharpened and a smile crept. "Oh, Icarus," she'd whisper back. "There you are." "It's wonderful," I'd say, pointing to the drawing. "Is this you, Mom?" With each occurrence, she'd simply smile before returning to the page. Minutes would pass as if I'd left before she'd whisper again, having always asked the same thing. "Oh, Icarus, when are you going to bring her home to me?" At the time, I hadn't noticed there being a slight change to the question, considering she'd asked something similar throughout my 20s. With every visit home, she'd nag me with the same request. "Icarus, when are you going to bring home a daughter for me to love?" To which I'd simply laugh and brush it off. I didn't have a relationship with anything other than drugs in my teens, codependency with sedation being a cruel bitch. And while I may have longed for romance in my early to mid-20s, the relationships I'd developed, all being very short, were hollow. I couldn't receive another's love, let alone give it. I grew to feel undeserving of affection, and its deliverance was an unfamiliar, foreign language. The concept of love was vastly misunderstood, and its closest relative was pain. I never brought a girl home for one reason: to love was to hurt, and I refused introducing someone to my mother out of fear of having them inevitably hurt her. It was the only request she ever wished of me, but I chose to keep my heart sealed shut in exchange for some bent notion of self-preservation. I wouldn't face the repercussions of that choice until finding Celine and Thea, the 2 who not only helped open my heart, but triggered internal conflicts of which I'd been unable to comprehend at the time. The suppression of emotion tied to the depths of my soul began to resurface, and as much beauty arose, so did that child's lack of love and fear of abandonment. I was scared, confused, and undeniably resistant, but it's only in surrendering to ourselves that we'll ever discover the freedom to both share and receive love selflessly. Due to wars being waged internally with trauma and externally with alcohol, distance between Celine and I was growing. So, in hopes of expressing myself properly, I began to write her letters, many in which detailed the events of my past and weren't given to her, never having felt the time was quite right. But through this process, I came to realize that a voice longing to be heard was the very same I'd once sought to bury. To share my story with Celine in those letters was nothing short of expressing it to myself, while finally beginning to accept its healing. Even with distance, she'd remain the mirror to bridge me back, having found my soul once more. The letters I did give had been written on cardstock that my mother gifted before her passing, each having a drawing of her creatures. If she was never to meet Celine, I felt that those cards would at least symbolize the sanctity of a mother's boundless love. A few of the first ones read as follows. Celine Hawk, When my mother would experience an episode, she'd channel what was seen in her head onto paper. Much like your own, you could say they were her creatures. Then one day she began drawing them onto blank cards. I'd always ask her the same thing, why they were left blank, what were they for, to which she'd never tell me, yet continued making them. For her last Christmas, exactly 1 month before passing, she'd gift me that stack of blank cards, and I'd ask for the last time, why haven't you written in them for me? Only then had she told me, because, my Icarus Mikhail, these cards are not for you. One day you will find the one you care for most. One day you will find the one you care most for, and they will be for her. Perhaps a part of my mother knew her time drew near, that these cards would be a way to finally meet the daughter I never brought home to her. This is the first blank card of hers that I've ever written in, and you are the one she spoke of. These cards mean the world to me, but they weren't made for me. My mother intended them for the one who means the world to me, you. I wish she'd gotten the chance to meet who they'd been brought life for, but I know as she watches over me writing this now, that a part of her will find a way to you too. I love you, Celine Hawk, and here are just a few reasons why. I love that you're just as stubborn, arrogant, hard-headed, and weird as me. I love that when I speak to you, you aren't just listening to my words, but feeling the parts of my soul they're coming from. I love that when you met me, you stopped hiding your smile and began sharing it with the world. I love that when you look at the moon, I can see it resting in your eyes. I love that when I look into those hazel eyes, I'm looking into the infiniteness of the cosmos itself. I love that no matter how bad my mood is, seeing your scrunchy face always makes me feel better. I love that no matter how guarded you seem, you feel deeply with every emotion held. I love that you trust me enough to show vulnerability. I love that you reside in the dark, for those who cannot be without the light. I love that you can bring the absolute beauty of your creatures to life for others to meet and appreciate. I love that without saying a word, you push me to be the eternity lying within. I love that I love you for being you, bird. Celine Hawk, too many times in our lives to count are we beaten down, left hopeless, feeling broken and betrayed. And sometimes, all we need to remember the strength that's gotten us through those tough times is for a hand to reach out and pick us back up onto our feet. You were and always will be that hand for me. I will never be able to promise perfection in myself, nor that I won't make mistakes, but I can promise you that my hand will always be reaching out for yours. Celine Hawk, you're the strongest, wisest, most passionate soul I've ever been lucky enough to trip over my own shoelaces before, and I will never live to see the day I ever let you forget that. I know in my heart that your mother looks down on you each day, so unbelievably proud of the woman you've become, and the daughter she raised. Moonhawk, 'twas dawn on a hill when hearing its shrill, perched on an old oak, destined to croak, gripping a branch, rotten and blanch. 'Twas another I saw nearing the sun, floating through light in all its good fun. Feathers brown, black, and red glistened in wings it kept spread. One claw held a bone, the other a stone. It carried the land to never keep strand. Soaring alone, they'd remind it of home. This bird that I watch isn't like any other. This bird that I watch, holding spirit of mother. It flew with such purpose, flew with such drive. For a time and so long, I'd found something alive. A bird who could dance now took me by chance. I knew it'd been fate. It wasn't too late. A soft-spoken word brought forth a bird. To understand love is what I speak of. Perhaps the morrow comes with no sorrow, but to rest on this branch and watch over my bird, the one who will dance. What is it I see in a bird such as me? What is it I see? It flies free. It flies free. While I'd continue writing in these blank cards for Celine, it wasn't until long after that I began to think back on what my mother had asked while making them. That question which shifted slightly. What was once? When are you going to bring home a daughter for me to love? Changed in the year before her death, when the episodes became more severe. In that period, while watching her draw them, she'd now ask, when are you going to bring her home to me? I hadn't caught it then, but now I know what she meant. While it may seem to be an absurd stretch of the hysteric man's imagination, I always felt my mother's creatures held an odd resemblance to how I perceived Celine. Strange, mystic, and ethereal, yet I hadn't pieced it together. The creatures she'd been sketching over and over while asking when I'd bring her home weren't creatures at all, nor were the birdhouses just imperfect homes unsuitable for living. My mother was drawing Celine, how she saw her, knowing how I'd see her, while calling her bird home. Her illness, visions, and gifts made her a seer. Having known she wouldn't meet Celine before passing, those cards would carry her indwelling spirit and share those magics she'd felt unable, just as those found in fable. Yes, a beautiful chapter for a most beautiful day. Again, it brings me back to, what Icarus told me before we depart, that this story is only real to the extent of one's belief in the unreal. And yes, what an absurd stretch of the hysteric man's imagination. But what if? What if it wasn't an absurd stretch of the imagination? What if it wasn't just mental illness? Who knows? Either way, it is what was written in the stars above. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I can't wait till next time. I think I am going to go have myself some licorice. Treat myself, since I am in such a good mood right now. Beautiful day, beautiful mood, deserves a beautiful little treat. Yes, a most wondrous treat for me. See you next time.